but we'll
Okay,
get started, I guess. Yeah, and feel free to just like ask questions yourself as well. I guess it's a conversation more than anything.
sure.
And our audience, I guess, are from food and beverage, mostly hospitality, but also corporates. There's a lot of corporates that are curious about, this space and how they can get involved as well. So,
Mhm.
okay, let's just get started with an icebreaker.
Sure.
All right, so you've been in Bali for quite some time now. What is your favorite Balinese dish?
My favorite Balinese dish is a dish called ayam betutu, uh,
Oh,
which is chicken betutu. Um, which is like a marinated chicken in traditional Balinese herbs and spices. It's really amazing. It's of course a rice dish with veggies and sprouts, and the base is made from like the traditional Balinese bumbu base. So it's like turmeric, ginger, galangal, lemongrass.
mm,
Yeah, amazing stuff. And there so happens to be, I think, one of the best Bitutu places not far from our place, and so we can, yeah, take it away here, and and it costs like $1 for a portion, so why
yeah,
not?
that's the best. The
Yes.
local foods are the best.
Yeah.
They're so tasty, but so affordable. And yeah, so my second icebreaker question, I guess, is Ubud or Canggu?
Oh my gosh. Neither.
Why is that?
Um, I think Ubud and Canggu are now what, not anymore what they used to be. Well, Canggu, obviously, Canggu was just rice paddies, not too long ago. Um, and now it's just concrete, restaurants, beach bars. It's really not Bali anymore. And Ubud is really bad for traffic now because it was, like the roads are really narrow and there's a lot of people there, and um there's been a really significant change in atmosphere where there's this I think pretty significant spiritual tourism thing happening.
Mm,
And you see.
pseudo spiritual tourism, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, I think a lot of people come here looking for answers, and Ubud is kind of the go-to place. So I think there still are sorry, I think there still are authentic places that you can go to, and connect with traditional wisdom and practices, but I think they're getting more and more rare. And a lot of places that are sort of capitalizing on that market and
Yeah,
providing sort of, yeah, the sort of industrial um, spiritual
yeah,
experiences. So unfortunately, none of the two. I live far away from those two. Yeah, for now,
yeah.
untouched area.
That's unfortunate because Ubud was my go-to place for that, spiritual fix, as you said. But we'll get back to that on the ecotourism part and tourism in general in Bali later.
Yeah.
So let's start with maybe a little bit of an intro of yourself, where you're from, how did you end up in this agricultural, regenerative farming industry per se?
Hmm. Well, so I'm from France, well, kind of, because I only moved to France when I was 18. So I grew up abroad in the Philippines, and then in Australia, and then in the Netherlands. Um, yeah, most of my childhood was Philippines and Australia, and we were lucky enough to have houses with big gardens. And from very early on, I really loved to be out in the garden, with plants, just being outdoors. I think that's really the origin of my interest in agriculture. I would say just with plants in general. I really do think that plants are the most evolved and magical beings on this planet. They were here long, long before us, and they will be here long, long after us. So yeah, I've always been very curious about uh, permaculture, growing food. So that's really sort of, you know, the human background. My education was in business and on entrepreneurship studies with a major in finance. So I studied in France and I started a business there that was a technology company, technology startup that was focused on video hosting. This was at the beginning of the sort of YouTube, MySpace era for those of us who were already alive back then. Um,
MySpace and Zanga, right?
yeah, exactly. Hey. Um, and that was pretty far from nature, but still, while running this company, I was always um, yeah, still very connected to plants. You know, my apartment in Paris was a mini jungle, and so that's really been in my heart since ever. And I had the opportunity to leave this company in 2019, and preparing for that departure, I actually came to Bali with my partner at the time, now my wife, and we were sort of scouting where we would move to. We were thinking either Thailand, Philippines, or Indonesia, specifically Bali. And we came here and just fell in love with the people, the energy, the nature, especially. And when you go out of the touristy areas, it you know really still is yeah, magical place. So we moved here with the intention of doing good in a very broad sense. Um, and very early on, met with Tim, my now business partner, who was just about to found Astungkara Way with a group of local fresh agriculture graduates. And yeah, we started on this mission first, working with local farmers to help them transition away from chemical rice farming. That was really the beginning, and the sort of business model around that was integrating um, courses for international visitors, where they could come, you know, participate in a course where they could connect with local farmers and participate in the rice cycle, really hands-on, feet in the mud kind of thing. And yes, you know, my
Wow.
interest for farming and agriculture just blew up from there, and I've been yeah, learning and you know, incorporating as much knowledge as possible since then. So this was in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess since then, the program or the focus on Asunkara Way has really evolved. You've incorporated that ecotourism aspect of it, which is the trails part, but also Asunkara Way farms, right? So that's where I guess we got to know you guys and your proposal. So our first outside of Hong Kong, China project was actually Asunkara Way project, which was over 2 years ago now. And so in that time, we've provided our Restore grant for you guys to support your farming community in scaling and adopting complex rice system. And complex rice system, for those who have not heard, is a method of rice farming that integrates some traditional practices, such as, including ducks and mazola and legumes, and also the inclusion of ecological innovations and technology as well, in some way or form. So a project for us that focuses on regenerative rice farming totally makes sense, not just from the biodiversity perspective and the the biodiversity restoration perspective, but also on food security and climate resilience, especially when over half of the world's population relies on rice as a staple, right? So maybe I'll tell you a little bit of background in terms of how like this project tied into Zero Footprint's agenda, which is very much on soil health and how this inclusion occurred. So I had a restaurant back in 2012 to 2019, and I closed the restaurant right before COVID. But in 2018, when I was still running the restaurant Grassroots Pantry, We led a full LCA study on our operations emissions and noticed that even though we were a plant-based restaurant, but plant commodities such as like avocado, cacao, coffee, and of course rice, all have very high carbon footprints. And so of course, as a like a staples, we can't not serve them, right? So that really led me to researching on like, are there alternatives, for lower carbon emitting rice or lower carbon emitting avocado? So of course, we know like sourcing locally and regionally as close as possible would reduce emissions, but very nominally because the transportation stage of a food emission, a food emissions is actually quite nominal. But then from research, we ultimately found out that the highest impact is actually on how we farm. So rice that's grown with chemicals, and chemically made fertilizers and pesticides on land that's already degraded or, in the progression to be becoming eroded, and which lacks microbial life will of course emit more carbon, and it's going to be more carbon intensive compared to rice that is grown on land that's more properly managed and without those chemicals. And you say that on your report as well over and over again, and it's, I guess, to people like us it makes total sense, but why are we not adopting it easily, you know and so maybe this is a chance for you to start talking about how groundbreaking this pilot was for you guys, and for Bali's rice farming industry as a whole.
Um, yeah, thank you for that introduction. It is true that yeah, as you say, rice is consumed by more than half the world's population, and we regularly have groups, whether it's students and or sometimes adults who come out to the rice paddies with us, and they have never seen rice before. They see rice for the first time. They're like, "Oh, okay, this is what the plant looks like." And a lot of these are Asians. Most of them are from cities, right? So there is a very significant disconnect um, with our food and where our food comes from, and what it means to grow this food. So our adventure started early on. As I said, Astungkara Way really started by working with rice farmers. But when we started, we were by no means specialists. We started really by listening to rice farmers and trying to understand what were the challenges that they were facing. And what came up very early on was that they were facing the rising costs of inputs, chemical inputs in this case, and declining yields, which meant, declining soil fertility and soil degradation that you mentioned as well. And even though that's not how the farmers would typically interpret their declining yields. And they also just mentioned the overall declining, um, let's say, perception of value of farming, especially from younger generations. So these are, really um, the three elements which are on a collision course, right? No young people wanting to farm, soil becoming tired of being farmed, and progressive reduction in availability of the chemicals and fossil fuels that are needed to produce fertilizers. That's also something that a lot of people perhaps don't fully understand, is just how much of our agriculture is really just a process of transforming energy which is stored below ground in the form of natural gas or petrol, oil, transforming those reserves of energy into energy for plants. And I mean, that is really what recent agriculture has become since the 60s and 70s, what we I think it's very strangely call the Green Revolution, right? I mean, it's anything but green. But it was absolutely revolutionary. It was the idea that, okay, a farm doesn't produce its own fertility anymore. It brings its fertility from outside. And of course, when you do that, well, you're transporting facilities, so you have, carbon footprint around transport. You need to produce those fertilizers, those pesticides, etc., usually in a very big factory or plant that's usually very far away. Um, so there are costs to this, there are carbon costs to this, and there's especially an autonomy cost to this for farmers. The farmer becomes dependent on third parties. So what we set out to do is looking for alternative methods to bypass this whole system. And we started by testing natural farming with rice farmers. So the idea is that the course that we ran, where these international visitors would come in and participate in rice planting and harvesting, we would take the revenue from that and subsidize the farmers to stop using chemicals and to balance potential drops in yields. And there were definitely drops in yields. The farmers got much lower yields, but we would compensate that by sharing a portion of the revenue of the course for them so they didn't have a drop in revenue. Um, and so we did struggle for about 2 years, to really find a way to maintain yields, to maintain profitability for farmers, and whilst stopping to use chemicals. And that the solution to that really came, thanks to the pilot that we did with Zero Footprint Asia, where we were paired with a team of researchers who had been researching a method of regenerative rice farming that they call complex rice agrosystems or systems. And the basis of that is really embracing agroecology, right? So it's growing rice in a way that works with nature, with ecological elements. So you mentioned ducks, azolla. Um, there's also, elements like making your own compost, for example, instead of burning. Typically what is done is after a rice cycle is finished, the rice is harvested, and there's a lot of rice straw which is left on the field, and that is typically burnt and emits, vast amounts of um, methane and all sorts of pollutants. But that is an amazing source of compost, right? So, sorry, by reintegrating livestock, um, plants that work well in flooded environments. So typically the fern that you mentioned, azolla, which is a nitrogen fixing fern. So it fertilizes water. It also feeds the ducks. Um, and by making compost at the end of the rice cycle, and also by planting border crops. So you mentioned legumes earlier. It could also be, things like chili, eggplant, tomato, flowers that are planted around the perimeter of the rice paddy. This creates an ecosystem for natural pest predators, so you don't need to use chemical pesticides. And at the same time, what we've seen is that it especially drastically increases the profit for farmers. This is a secondary yield, reduces also their dependence on, rice, which they can harvest only every 4 months. So the border plants are really an important element of this method of regenerative rice farming. And all of these things put together, um, creates a system where on the first cycle where farmers transition, we actually have an increase in yield. So it's very low. It's actually just on average plus 1%. So let's say the yield is maintained, but that's already kind of a breakthrough because until then we had only had drops in yield when you stop using chemicals. So you have basically a maintain in yield and then a slow and steady increase of yields. So, second rice cycle, so 4 months after the start, you're at plus 12, and then you're starting to reach plus 16, plus 22, and then it plateaus at around plus 34, plus 36%. These are averages. Some farmers actually will go up to like plus 50%. Um, so this was absolutely, mind-blowing for us, as it was, for you guys when we were sharing these results. Um, because it shows that, agroecology and working with nature is not just an idea, it's a reality. Like you can do this at scale. um, Farmers don't have drops in rice yields, and they have significant drops in costs of inputs because they are no longer buying anything from off the farm. They're producing their own fertility, and they get all of these additional yields like duck meat, duck eggs, the veggies and flowers that we talked about. So it was, yeah, long story short, it was a very, very significant realization that this is not a dream. This is a reality, and we can do this.
Yeah, and it's with these pilots and of course the inclusion of collecting that data, asking those questions and structuring what you've gathered that you're able to kind of inform people, almost report to the community obviously, but then also for researchers that it agroecology working with nature and growing rice without inputs, chemical inputs, can actually be productive and profitable. And I guess that's the peace of mind that farmers want to know, right? And I understand that you earlier mentioned that you had to kind of support them throughout maybe over the first cycle or first couple cycles with like a prepayment scheme to ensure that they don't take the risk on their own. And so was it a very challenging, you know, way of trying to get them through? What do you think of this prepayment scheme in the long run, and how would you, I guess, remodel that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question because the first question that comes to mind is always, can farmers take the risk to do such a shift? Um, uh, I think we've learned, two things about farmers is first of all that they are extremely risk averse. But the second thing is when they see something that works, they're also very quick to copy. So these are really two key findings, I think, for anyone who wants to work on, um, you know, regenerative ag projects is use those two things. And so the first thing, the fact that the farmers are very risk averse, especially rice farmers, is completely understandable because they have little or no savings. So when if your program is to say, well, okay, we're going to stop using chemicals, trust us on this one, it's quite difficult. So we implemented a prepayment system, as you just said, which was the idea that when you get on board with us, we guarantee on the first cycle that if you have a drop in profit from what you were getting before, we will compensate that drop. And we do this by basically paying upfront what you were getting before. And if you're going to yield less, then the loss is on us. You don't need to reimburse that. And if you yield more, then we'll pay you the difference. So it's kind of a very low risk shift for farmers. Of course, it implies that we have working capital to be able to do this. And it only worked, well, at least it worked at our scale because we had funders who were able to provide us with that working capital. What's interesting to know is that we don't do this anymore now. We did that for the first year and a half to get our first farmers on board, and basically to get our first results. We weren't sure that this was going to work. So we also didn't want to drag farmers into, a losing enterprise. So we did this saying that, yeah, that, we want to cover them to not endanger their livelihoods, basically. But once we realized that farmers were not yielding less, that we didn't have to do this, we removed this prepayment system because it was actually inducing a bit of a distortion in the communication with farmers, in the sense that there were farmers who were joining, perhaps because they saw this as, perhaps solely as a great economic opportunity. It's here's a company who's completely de-risking my next cycle for me. Whereas the farmers that we wanted to attract were farmers who were engaged in this cause, right? Because we've been talking about maintaining yields and profitability, and we're talking about that because that's the most important element for most farmers. Let's say the first most important element. But the ecological benefits, whether it's increase in soil fertility, in water quality, in biodiversity, and even on a very sort of human and spiritual level, the renewal of the sense of land stewardship is really what we're aiming for, right? And so in our communication with farmers, it was really important that the farmers who joined us um, were motivated by that and not by solely, economic de-risking, let's say. So we removed that because we also didn't need to prove the system anymore. We had so much data and so much farmer testimony that we had farmers coming to us, we had groups coming to us. So, we tested. We're like, okay, let's not talk about the prepayment system anymore. Are they still going to join? And they did. So we removed that, and it was a lot less cash burden for us as well.
Great. Yeah. I think that's a way to kind of even prove the resiliency perspective, right? Because and I guess, sorry, I'm like, my words are jumbled. We want to inspire farmers to adopt um, complex rice systems, of course, for economic, benefits, but also for the environmental benefits. But in the long run, they need to be able to sell to themselves and their neighbors that it's actually the most resilient form of farming.
Right.
In the face of climate change and weather patterns, no handouts or charity is going to save you forever, right? So I think that's, I guess, the hopefully the awakening, for some when they go through this process. So you mentioned the environmental impacts. Can you share some of those for us on soil, water, and biodiversity?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that we were able to do with the support of Zero Footprint is not only learn from experts and grow our team, it was also to collect a lot of data on the way. So it's often said data is the new gold, or all these data companies are is like the new model for startups. But yeah, it makes sense for us as well, because if we're gonna call it regenerative farming or regenerative rice, it better be backed up by data. Um, so we started this quite early on, and there are multiple indicators that we were looking at, but perhaps, yeah, the three that we can mention now are soil organic carbon or soil organic matter, both are connected, water quality, and biodiversity. So on the first one, so soil organic carbon is the amount of carbon that stays in the soil over time, right? There's a lot of carbon leaching from the soil. There's a carbon cycle, right? So um, the average amount of soil organic carbon in a conventional rice field, at least in Bali, um, is about 2%, right? And we measured fields at the beginning of their transition, so while they were still conventional, and we measured what that looked like 8 months later, so after two rice cycles. And after two rice cycles, we are at about 2.5%, 2.54 exactly. Um, that may not seem like much, but to give you an idea, the amount of soil organic carbon in a tropical forest, like in undisturbed soil for hundreds of years, is between 3 and 5. Okay, so a 1% increase is very significant. A 0.5% increase over 8 months is very significant. Um, what soil organic carbon does is that it stores water, it provides food for biology. So, having having this 25% increase within 2 cycles is very significant. This was the first thing. The second thing was biodiversity. In this case, we're looking at especially insect biodiversity, so beneficial insects and pest diversity as well. There's an index that exists to measure this, which is called the Shannon-Weiner index, and um, basically um, the amount of biodiversity that you would find in a rice paddy before transitioning was about one on the index. All right. And after transitioning, after about 8 months, we're up to sorry, I think numbers just slipped my mind.
1.45 species.
1.45. Yeah, thank you very much. Um, What's important to know is that 1.5 is the figure that is given to a balanced ecosystem. The scale goes up to like 3, 4, and 3, 4 is for, again, tropical rainforests where you have thousands of species per square meter. That's how you calculate this, is the density of different species per given area. So once again, going from 1 to actually, our findings show that in a complex rice system field after 8 months, 1.45 is almost rebalanced, right? We're almost back to 1.5. So, I mean, this was very significant for us to see that in such a short amount of time, you can rebalance an ecosystem. You can almost rebalance an ecosystem. So, for sure, 12 months, 16 months, 2 years down the line, we're definitely above 1.5. We still don't have that data yet because we've been collecting biodiversity data for not that long. But it's definitely moving significantly in the right direction. This was quite a surprise. We didn't think that it would be this fast, actually. And
Yeah,
the last,
go
sorry,
ahead.
yeah, if you want to comment on those, please feel free.
No, I just wanted to say, and that truly has to do with first and foremost removing chemicals off the field, because whatever chemicals that we are actually putting in the soil, it might actually deter some pests, that are maybe damaging your crops, but what it does is also it kills off the good pests, right? The predators or that are actually consuming the bad pests. So I think most people or farmers are sold this quick fix, but there's no quick fix in nature because everything is connected, and our ecosystems are fully connected. So yeah, please enlighten me on the on the water impact.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I kind of left, kept the best for last, I would say, because our biggest surprise was on water. Um, so we ran tests on the water inlets to a farming community. So that's the water that arrives within, a large area, and that water is shared amongst all the farmers. So we took water samples there at the arrival within the farming community. We took water samples at the exit of a community of farmers that was just using conventional farming. And within that community, we have a group of farmers who have pretty much all, it's like 64 out of 67 farmers transitioned to regenerative rice farming. And we looked at the water quality at the end of that sub division, right? So we have input and then 2 outputs. And what we were looking at is the concentration of heavy metals. Um, so it was quite focused on things like mercury, lead, boron, cadmium. I think we were testing 6 or 7 different types of heavy metals. These are heavy metals which can be transmitted to humans. So these can flow through the water, which goes then into a river, which then goes into the sea, attaches to an algae, then is eaten by a fish, and then that fish ends up on a plate, and then it ends up in you. Um, So this was very significant, and what we saw was, first of all, the inlet water was already on average, but it was quite consistent, was already about 2 times above the safety level for humans. All right, so the concentrations of the heavy metals were already very high. That's because, well, that water is coming from other, farming communities. And at the exit of the conventional rice fields, the concentration of those heavy metals went from 2 times above safety level to about 4 times above safety level. So the concentration of pollutants was doubled just after this one community. And you can imagine just how many communities this water travels through, right? And it gets rediluted with other water that isn't used for farming, but along the way it just picks up loads of these toxic chemicals. What was extremely significant is that at the outlet, at the output of the farming community that was practicing regenerative rice farming, um, all of the heavy metals that we were testing were undetectable. So yeah, literally below 0.00 something, and then you can't test below that level. So that was very surprising. Uh, and of course, you can think like, where did they go? As part of our methodology of the method that we share with farmers is that each farmer implements a water filtration um, uh, basin at the entrance of his rice field, his or her rice field. And we use plants to do this filtration. These are traditional, well, plants that have traditionally been used to clean waterways. So like things like water hyacinth, vetiver grass, and also biochar. So it's a very small pond, typically 2 meters by one. So it's really a very small footprint, and it's densely planted with those plants, and it has a bottom filter of biochar. So this is how it's working, and so with these three things, we're really able to, I think, now very confidently affirm um, this is regenerative rice farming. We are restoring biodiversity, soil carbon, water quality, and improving livelihoods. So, yeah, it's why isn't all rice farmed this way?
That's incredible. I mean, how the government is not informed of this, I think needs to, yeah, they definitely need to learn about how you guys are actually implementing RF, and all of the health, environment, food impacts, or benefits that it's actually creating for the whole of Bali. So yeah, yeah, when I was reading through the report, I was like, that, you expect all the good stuff, but that I think was quite mind-blowing. And so how are the farmers taking in these impacts? Like, how are they responding to the results?
Um, a lot of them are also very surprised. Um, uh, I mean, we do have a vast majority. It's difficult to quantify, but our team always says it's, perhaps, 90%, 95% of the farmers who are really doing this because they care, not because they're out to make more money. This is really comforting for them. Um, we we started in 2023, right? This pilot program. We started with 17 farmers. Now we're just under 200 farmers, and there are, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 farmers who have stopped. And unfortunately, I mean, out of those, I think it's five. Out of those five, actually three passed away. One of them got sick, so he had to stop farming. So it's not like he went back to conventional. And one of them, his wife passed away, and he didn't have any more time for rice farming. So, I mean, I share this to say that we have, there hasn't been a single farmer who's gone back to conventional farming. And this is very significant as well. Um, uh, I think what this goes to show is that it's ticking a lot of boxes, right? On the stewardship side, on the reconnection to land, on the profitability, the positive outcomes. So I think it's a whole package, right, for the farmers to feel like, okay, we're part of something that makes sense over time. Um, we have,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of farmers now are not, are out of their sort of engagement period with us, which is 8 months, like 2 cycles to transition away from conventional farming, but they're still applying the method. So,
Mm, yeah.
yeah.
That's very good to hear. And is the rice you're selling right now more expensive? By how much more?
So conventional rice sells for about 16,000 rupiah per kilo. Um, Organic rice is usually about 27,000, and we're actually kind of in the middle. We're at 20.
Wow.
Yeah, we are on purpose. Our goal is to replace conventional rice, right? This is quite important. Right now, there's this sort of split in the market where you have conventional rice on one side and organic expensive rice on the other. And you can imagine that there are very few local people who eat organic rice.
Yeah.
Um, because it's
They
expensive
can't
and we
afford.
consume
Yeah.
so much of it, right? And from the start, our goal was definitely not for this rice to end up in the plates of rich visitors, but to end up in the plates of of the inhabitants of this island. So we've on purpose really like worked our business model and squeezed our margins so that we can fit it into selling at 20,000 per kilo. This is wholesale. We only sell B2B.
Mhm.
So to restaurants, to off-takers. Because if we were selling 1 or 2 kilos at a time, then we would have a lot of transport and packaging costs. So we're still not at a big enough scale that we can do sort of low cost, low quantities. Um, which is unfortunate because most of the locals actually buy in low quantities. It's difficult,
Mm,
for them to buy a 50-kilo bag because it's a big investment, right? So we're trying to get there. But this is
yeah.
really very much our goal is to replace conventional rice.
Mm. That's incredible. No, that's really cool to hear. I didn't even know it was actually priced in the middle. Because yeah, that is usually the deterrence. And a lot of the chefs usually are like, well, I want to buy it, but it can't be more expensive than, conventional. So if you're putting it this like right in the middle, you give them the stats, the data, maybe eventually can include some nutritional benefits or additional, benefits of that rice,
Yep, it does.
then
Does. Yeah.
it does already. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've done that. We've run those tests. Um, yeah, interesting as well. Like there are more antioxidants.
Mm,
There's more fiber. There's yeah, it's a healthier rice to consume.
yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
obviously.
Then it makes total sense because then the hospitality players can actually communicate that to their diners as well. And you'd think that diners don't want or are cost what's the word for it? Uh, Cost, what's the word? They don't want to pay up for good food,
Mhm.
cost averse. No.
Like too
Yeah,
cost conscious.
yeah. You think that diners are cost conscious, but actually most diners who are eating out at restaurants that, they're already paying, $100, USD for, they will pay more for better eggs. They will pay more for better rice.
Yeah.
So this is like a conundrum for us when we have discussions with hotels and restaurants that increase that 30-cent increase per kilogram is it really going to break your margin, you know?
Mhm.
And I think in our industry, we're so fixated to the minuscule like percentages that we can't see the greater impact and the greater benefits of valuing biodiversity, of water improvements, of soil health, and such and such. So yeah, this has been very eye-opening, and I think that you guys need to do everything to really share and communicate, market it so that more people know about it. And of course, we want to be able to see you, get more farmers on board, and help to regenerate Bali's rice farms.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that, Peggy. I do want to, share a bit about that because until now, the from what I said, you could imagine, well, why aren't there like tens of thousands of farmers doing this, right? Why is it such a low number after quite a while? And there's we're really at the beginning of a shift actually right now. I think we spent the last, sort of 2.5 years um, doing like step one, which is, well, proving to the world and to ourselves and to the farmers that we work with that this is that this is a reality. Step one, yeah, you need to, we read about regenerative farming and it sounds great, and we're like, okay, but can you actually regeneratively farm rice and still continue feeding people and not drop yields, right? There's a food security topic here, and I think well, I think clearly we have proven that you can. This took us that long to prove because we had to really collect a lot of data in different areas, different setups, etc. So we're really entering phase two of our work, and we're literally calling it phase two. Which is okay. Now that we have these findings, how do we get, and this is actually our target now, how do we get 10,000 farmers to adopt regenerative rice farming in the next 2 years? So this is a very significant increase.
Mm,
And one of the things is to understand that regenerative farming is a journey. And until now, we have sort of concentrated that journey within 8 months, right? Within 2 cycles. Um, and it's not all farmers who can commit to doing that, right? To integrate ducks and azolla and border plants and composting and water filtration and all of these things. The farmers that we're working with could do it and did it because we were working very closely with them. But it's just not possible for us to work very closely with 10,000 farmers. So phase two is really about starting to um, to help farmers adopt these practices step by step and not having to do it all within 8 months. And to do this, we're working with universities who have programs with farmers across Indonesia. We also want to create more content because I mean, just recently, which is kind of crazy that we figured this out only recently, but there's a Facebook group which is called Rice Farmers of Indonesia, and there are 75,000 people on that group. And it's farmers, filming what they're doing in their rice paddies in, very, kind of low quality videos. And a lot of those videos have tens and tens of thousands of views. And so we want to leverage those kind of platforms to say, okay, just for example, even if you continue using chemicals, just by introducing border plants around your paddy, you will have less pests, more yields, and you can harvest those sort of dead plants and mix them into your field, and you will need to input less fertilizers. And then
mm,
maybe our next video is, yeah, instead of burning your rice straw, here's an easy way to turn it into compost. And really doing it step by step. And I think that this is This is perhaps also a key, perhaps for also regenerative agriculture programs, is that a lot of them are very short and require farmers to make a strong sort of, one-time transition, exactly like we were doing. And I more and more feel like that is a bottleneck. It's a bottleneck to scalability. And that's what happened with us, is that basically we only found 200 farmers who were willing to implement all these steps in such a short amount of time. So our next phase is really about understanding that this will take time, but once it gets started, it is, I really believe, an unstoppable force.
Mm. It's really about progress and much less to do with perfection, with
Mhm,
any
mhm.
kind of
Exactly.
sustainability actions nowadays, I think just get started, do something, do one thing a day that already contributes,
Yeah.
in the grander scheme of things. And I wanted to ask also about what you mentioned, a comprehensive data collection project to determine the most optimal CRS practices that result in the highest economic returns.
Hmm.
Is that part of what you just discussed or something separate? Yeah.
It's part of what I discussed. So what you're describing is a research program that we've been running this year, since the beginning of the year. Um, Part of it was supported by ZFPA as well. So, once again, this would not have been possible without you guys. And uh, what we've found out from the data that I shared earlier is that if you implement the whole full spectrum of the tools of complex rice systems, you get great results.
Mm,
Okay, but what is the percentage of Indonesia's 23 million rice farmers who are actually going to implement all those steps? It's probably low. Maybe 5, maybe 10% at the best, maybe, of those 23 million farmers would implement, once again, DACA, ZOLA, border plans, composting, etc. So our current research program is actually about trying to understand which of these practices is the most impactful. Like if you were
mm,
to really focus on two or one or three, which would they be? In which order? Um, what's the most impact you can have with the least effort? And that's a whole um, uh, well, to have that data, it's a whole other methodology, right? Because we broke down the method into 8 levels of complexity, and we have multiple groups of farmers, each implementing each of those 8 levels, and then we cross analyze the data to find out, yeah, which one of these levels is likely um, to be the one that we should focus our efforts on.
mm,
Once again, level 8, let's say, so full complexity is a very elitist system. It kind of reminds me of that link that you shared with us recently, this regenerative agriculture certification program
mm,
that has these two categories, right? That has regenerative A grade and regenerative in transition. And the certification documents themselves indicate that the vast majority of farmers will be in transition. So this is just a realization that our 200 current farmers are all A grade. That's wonderful. But to get this out to thousands, millions of farmers, um, we need to find some middle ground. So this is what we're
yeah,
trying to figure out now is, yeah, what is the most impactful and low time consuming practices?
yeah. And I guess uh, if you want to know more about kind of what is it that we're benching this off of, like what kind of metric are we looking at? Um, in the States, zero footprint actually works against the cost effectiveness of each implementation based on carbon sequestration or potential carbon sequestration. So there's this software called the Comet Planner, where you input the type of land that you're growing, what type of crop, what kind of implementation or RF implementation on the size and scale. So like how many tons of compost per how many hectares, and then it throws out a number, which is the potential carbon that can be sequestered.
Right.
So that's what the CFP team would um, or that's how the CFP team would then allocate which projects are most cost effective, and
Hmm.
how they would then choose these projects. Of course, we don't have such technology and all of that data that the governments have collected over time, and these organizations that have been working on solar health have collected over time. So it's hard for us to bench it on that, but have a look because I think there is a Comet Planner Global.
Okay.
So you might be able to see something there that would sound interesting for you, y'all.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of time left, but I know that, of course, Astungkara Way is run by very young people like yourself, but even younger, great team
Younger.
members, yeah, who are so passionate about the cause. And like without them, I think that data collection part, the talking, communicating with the farmers, the facilitation of the entire program would be quite difficult.
Mm.
So it's fantastic to have youth involved. Maybe give, a little takeaway of what you've seen and what's inspired you about having young people work in this field or wanting to enter this field. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great. I mean, if that is sort of perhaps the last or the beginning of the last questions, it's really great to end and important to end with youth and the future. Where is this all headed? Because we've been having these great results, and we're talking about helping existing farmers to shift. Um, but existing farmers in Bali are on average 60 years old, just under 60. So they're at the end of the line, kind of. They're maybe going to do this for another 5 years maximum. So there is a very significant concern, and focus for us on, um, is everything that we're doing actually likely to create more attractiveness for farming in the future, right? In the end, this is what we need to work on as well. It's not just helping existing farmers to shift, but to create a new model for farming, because the economics, especially of farming, especially farming rice, like right now, is, I mean, it's a no-brainer that you would not want to be a rice farmer, right? It's like, of course, the average monthly profit for a rice farmer in Indonesia is about $100, right? And here in Bali, the average, well, sorry, not the minimum wage is 200. So um, so it's really the economics that need to be redefined. And to do this, definitely regenerative rice farming is a very significant key. Not only do we have increased profits, diversified profits, but there's a potential here to to really switch the foundations of farming. So, to put it simply, we are shifting rice fields into rice farms. And a rice farm is really much more attractive for young people than a rice field. A rice farm has different yields, as we said, between ducks, duck eggs, flowers, veggies. Rice is just one component of that farm. Um, and to uh, you need to manage that farm. So there's more of a sort of, management and stewardship aspect to it, rather than just a labor, input and yield output logic that a rice field has. So we have programs, internships and studies with youth from universities. As you mentioned, our team is also very young, and we've seen just so much enthusiasm coming from young people working on this, feeling like they are part of a solution and not, part of the problem. That we think that we're onto something here. If we can continue um, refining the method. We've already seen that profits are, almost double from conventional farming, so we're already on par with the minimum wage. If we can increase the average size of plots and change around a couple of other things, then we will definitely surpass the minimum wage that you can get in this case by being a rice farmer. And then it's a big societal change that can happen.
Yeah, I think that's such a hopeful message to end our interview. And I think that, there was something that I read or watched a few weeks ago where research has shown that once around 3.5% of the whole population has begun to participate actively in a movement, success appears to be inevitable.
Mm.
Or this is called the 3.5% rule. And well, now this research is actually in the context of political movements, but of course, we all know that agriculture and food are political, especially
Mm.
in the 21st century. So now more than ever, I think that it really relies on grassroots organizations like yours and like ours at Zero Footprint to mobilize the people and the participation of farmers, hospitality sector, academia, governments, of course, and private businesses is what will really allow us to regenerate the future. But then let's close this up. To our audience, what can they do in in the context of Astungkara Way? How can they help as well? Yeah.
Well, if you are in Bali or Indonesia, you can purchase rice from us. You can support us through our website. We do receive and of course are glad to accept support donations. So people who uh, who just want to support. We use those donations directly to fund larger teams. Larger teams means more farmers trained. And we are about to launch um, uh, a new thing, let's say, which we are calling the regenerative network, where we already have a few participants to this, where especially food and F&B and hospitality establishments commit to providing us with a monthly service fee, let's say, and we use those funds to support our teams to work with more farmers, basically to restore ecosystems, restore soil health, waterways, air quality, and produce better food, and at the same time, all of that increasing farmer livelihoods. We call it a service fee because in exchange we provide very detailed reporting to our supporters. We provide also content for social media, for brand awareness that their brand is supporting our movement. So this is one way to support us as well. If you want to do that, you can just reach out to us by email, for example, contact@astungkaraway.com. And we're just about to launch this. It actually came from market demand, like F&B and hospitality establishments saying, okay, how can we support you guys other than buying your rice? Because sometimes they only use 100 kilos of rice per month, but they wanted to do more than that, especially they know that we don't really make money from selling rice to keep the price low. So this is something that we're launching, and hopefully which will carry us to reaching our 10,000 farmers in the next 2 years goal.
Fantastic. Well, I think let's close this off here. Do you have any additional things you want to add or any questions?
I think we've covered a lot. It's been really great. Thank you so much, Peggy, for this talk, for this opportunity, and for your support from the start. We have learned so much. We were talking about this, I think, a little while ago. Um, it's difficult to find support when you know that you still have so many mistakes to make. And your support has allowed us to make those necessary mistakes. I do hope that a conversation like this can enable others to make less mistakes on one side, or organizations to realize that it's a really good idea to support organizations like us to be able to make mistakes, but in the end to arrive at really beautiful outcomes. Um,
Mm,
this is not something which is good to do. It is something that we really need to
right.
do as a society, as a civilization. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think we all need to work together to realize somewhat the urgency of the situation. That's one thing I've learned being on the ground, in the fields for now so many years, is actually the urgency of the situation. um and at the same time, to not be motivated by fear,
Mm,
fear of the urgency. um the beauty of working with our team and in Bali is really the daily reminder that what we do out of love and out of care. And for me, that has been actually the most beautiful learning lesson of this whole journey, is just yeah, keep doing it, but just because just out of care and love, not out of fear.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Tangi, and it's been wonderful to visit you guys, in Bali, and also to learn from y'all as well. We believe that what we're doing is something that is new. It's different. It hasn't been done before, and we all make mistakes. And I think that you know seeking out the projects that understand that you can mitigate some of these mistakes and learn from it and work to solve it and create a better solution is, I think, the characters that we're looking for, um, because there is no single solution. There will never be one single solution. And we just got to be, on our feet and learning on the go and adapting on the go, especially in the face of climate crisis. So thank you so much for chatting with me. And to wrap this project up, I really would love for everyone to have a look at some of the videos you guys have recorded, and also, of course, read the article that we're about to publish with you guys. And yeah, that's it for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Peggy. Thank you
All
for those
right.
who watched until here.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, let me just try to stop this recording. And I think you receive any movement when the cloud recording is ready.